It's really a challenge for our officers, especially the officers on the front lines, to protect people's rights to protest and get their voice out and their demands. And obviously, in protests like this, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of anger. But we see protests all the time in Sacramento. We're the state of California, so any number of things are protested in our city on a daily basis. And so this last protest was challenging in that we had, what we would kind of call the normal protest. So they might have anger, they might be pretty volatile, but they don't have widespread destruction and widespread violence. So we saw that this whole time, especially during the day. But on the first weekend, when night fell, it was like a lot of the people that were involved in that would leave. So the crowd would shrink from like 1,000 down to about 400. And there would be a different group that would come in that was bent on destruction. We saw looting, violence towards officers, coordinating, bringing boxes of rocks and bricks. We had several officers hit in the head with bricks and rocks, throwing fireballs, shooting fireworks, trying to drag officers into the crowd. A lot of that is what happened that first weekend. And then for the last several days, we saw what we really, really want to protect in Sacramento, which is protesters, sometimes very large crowds, 1,200, 1,300, marching around in our streets, chanting, demanding, but not committing violent acts, not damaging property and destroying people's businesses. So that's much more what we're used to and what we really want to protect. So it was really the tale of two different groups. One that really cares about our community, really feels passionate and angry and frustrated about certain issues. And then another group that I don't really think we could even call protesters. They just came here to destroy our city.
Let me ask about that group. And I'm picking up that you haven't really seen a resurgence of that, but have you managed to track down the folks that you're looking for that are involved with that? Because that's a pretty serious, accusation to level, like that they had supply lines for weapons to attack your officers.
Yeah, we arrested that very first night on Friday. We arrested one of the people that threw a brick at the officers. In terms of the looting, I said about a week ago that our detectives will be looking at a lot of video, both video from security cameras, video from news outlets that were carrying things live, video from the businesses themselves, to try to hold people accountable that just ransacked and damaged our local businesses. We're doing that now. We haven't made arrests. We're going to continue to make arrests, and we will, when the detectives get to a point where we can announce those arrests, we will absolutely do that. But that is going on right now.
I think you're referring to the gentleman up in Clear Lake who was arrested, who's got his first court appearance next week. Are you able to shed any light on the organizational side of that? Like, do you believe he was part of a broader group, as we've seen alleged in some cities, that are trying to sort of make the protesters look bad? Is there any indication that there might be that sort of motive at play in what you saw that first weekend?
Well, it seems pretty evident that there's some sort of coordination or organizing efforts behind this. Now, whether every single person is part of that, I don't think so. Some people get swept up in the moment and commit criminal acts, but we saw groups coming in waves, shifts, if you will. There were boxes of rocks that we found. There were fireballs. There was a plan that every time we went to arrest somebody, there was groups that would form like their own protection detail and the person would slip. That's not what we normally see. Mm-hmm. And not only here in Sacramento, but across the country, those similar things were happening clear across our country in all these other cities, where you'll see other chiefs talking about boxes of rocks and pallets of bricks and those same things across our entire country. So it seems, I don't know who and what is behind it, but it seems pretty clear that there's some sort of organizing to some extent. Now, a lot of the people that we arrested are from at least this region, not necessarily all from Sacramento, but our suburb cities and things like that. So it's not like, 90% of the people that we do know where they're from because we arrested them are from out of state. A lot of them were relatively local from our region. So I don't know to what extent every single person is in some coordinated organization, but it was clear that there was some sort of coordination behind it. And we saw some people that we didn't arrest that we know are from out of state that potentially are part of different organizations that might be using the protests or the unrest as maybe cover for what they're trying to do. But we didn't arrest those folks for any criminal acts. But it was clear there was some sort of organization, at some part. To what extent, I couldn't tell you.
And it sounds like to what motive you don't necessarily know either. Whether it's
Well,
just,
I mean,
is it
the
just
motive
mayhem, or is it like trying to paint these protesters with a bad light? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so I don't know ultimately what the grand scheme, if there is one, but clearly the motive was to destroy our city and cause violence.
Understood. So there's sort of a national push now, and some local elements that are aligned with it, that are talking about defunding of police departments. And I wonder if you could address them, and specifically if there's someone who's starting to lean that way, thinking, you know what, we've tried reform, we've tried to improve the system we already have. I don't see another alternative. What do you say to someone who starts to think, hey, that looks like the only path forward that seems like it might get the change we're after?
Yeah, I think that's, from my perspective, that's very understandable. I think there's a significant portion of our society here in the United States that is very frustrated. They see things that they don't believe are right, like what happened in Minneapolis and has happened around the country, including here in Sacramento. They feel like there's not enough change or any change, because then they'll see another incident. So I understand the frustration and the anger, but I'd also say this. I don't know what like disbanding a police department would even look like. I know I would never want to live in a city that just flat out eliminates their police department. And in terms of defunding a department, cutting them by a certain percent, I think that really depends on the community that you're in and whether what you're looking for can withstand that. But for example, here in Sacramento, we respond to over 480 calls a day that we actually send somebody to, a police officer, a CSO, from our community. We get about 1,800 calls a day into our comm center from the community. And so I would say if we're going to disband a police department or defund a police department, who's going to handle all that? And that's not counting the self-initiated calls that our officers do or that our detectives do. That's only calls from our community that are asking for some sort of response from this department. We respond to 12,000 mental health related calls a year, 34 calls a day that averages out to. Who's going to respond to those if we don't have a police department or defund our department more than it is right now? We're over 100 officers less right now than we were 12 years ago in this department, and the city has grown probably 30 or 40,000 people, has a new arena downtown, more festivals, more functions. So I don't think that, in my opinion, is something that is reasonable for the city of Sacramento. But I would say this. There are a lot of things that this police department handles and every police department across the country handles that we shouldn't be handling. I mean, everything that happens in society, if there's no specific organization, group, or process for handling that, falls on the police department. So if somebody doesn't know who to call, they call 911 or our comm center and we respond. A lot of those mental health calls that we respond to, we shouldn't be going to. They don't have violence involved. They don't have a propensity for violence. And yet our community doesn't have anybody else to call. Probably a lot of these calls would be better served by a mental health professional responding or a social worker responding. Same with the homeless community. We respond to a lot of things that a police officer shouldn't be responding to. And a lot of our officer-involved shootings involve somebody in mental health crisis. So I think there is some things that can be done, whether it's taking money from the police department budget to pay for it or somewhere else. Is probably up to each individual local jurisdiction. But I think there is some significant change that could happen that not only are they things that a police officer shouldn't really be responding to, but in reality, there's much better people that could respond to that have the experience in that specific area, meaning not only for that call at the moment of that call, but long term, like how is this person getting help for that issue so we aren't returning there over and over and over again. A lot of our mental health calls are repeat calls. We go there over and over because that person hasn't been able to access services that would prevent the need for us to be called.
Sounds like you're envisioning sort of a future where I might call 911, and in addition to an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car, I could also get a mental health professional dispatched that way, potentially.
Yeah, either that or, at one point we didn't have 911 in this country. And, but now we do. If you asked a 2-year-old what 911 is, they would probably know, because the marketing, if you will, for 911 is so good that everybody knows what 911 gets, whether you're in New York or California. 911 gets you the same thing, gets you to somebody immediately, gets you fire or police in a relatively short amount of time. So whether it's through 911 or you create some other number where people call for a loved one in mental health crisis and you get some well-known thing that responds, I don't know that it matters, as long as somebody, there's a lot of people, not counting the stigma of mental health. Like, we really need, in mental health circles, we really need mental health to be looked at as the same as physical health. Like, if you have a broken leg, you're going to go to the hospital. Nobody has any problem. But if you have mental health problems, well, maybe you don't send your loved one to get help. But if we respond to, if we have families that do not access mental health services because either the stigma or because they flat out don't know who to call to get their loved one assistance. And so those are just two of the things in mental health related that we really need to work on.
Yeah, we've dove into that a little more than I expected to. And I know the mayor is calling for something similar, but I guess, is it an important distinction in your mind whether we are training officers or some core of officers to do that sort of responding to mental health work versus, a mental health professional who isn't armed necessarily? Is it a bad idea to have, it sounds like you're kind of hinting that it may not be the wisest idea to send the people with guns to every mental health crisis.
That's correct. But I think we still will need both, because some of these mental health related calls do involve violence. We had one last year at 20th and K where the guy is shooting a gun off in the middle of the street. Well, you have to have an officer respond to that. So it's important that we will still need to train our officers in mental health. We have a whole mental health team that's all they do. We have a full-time social worker now that works for the police department, that works on homeless issues, mental health issues, and things like that. So we'll still need that training amongst officers, because we are still going to have to respond to some mental health calls. I'm just saying there's two things. One, if there's not violence involved, then we shouldn't be sending an officer. And two, even when there is violence potentially involved, once our officers get that situation calmed down to where nobody's unsafe, we should be able to then immediately hand it over to somebody that's a mental health professional. So this person and their family can get the help that they need. So these potential issues in the future, whether they be violence related or otherwise, have a better chance of not occurring.
Yeah. Can I kind of just get your sense of where you see your profession going? The mental health thing is one interesting facet of it, but is it enough to sort of create a new service and maybe make some policy tweaks to policing? Or do you think structurally policing has a different future, like vastly different than what we're used to?
Yeah, I don't know if it's structural change or not. I'm open to anything, but I think the underlying issues that are the foundation of the issues that we have between law enforcement and community is really an issue that we have in society. And it's been an issue since the inception of this country, and that is of race and of differences. There's never been a time in the history of our country that there hasn't been an issue regarding race or differences. And I think that is the underlying foundation of what is causing a lot of these issues. You hear a lot in these protests and protests before this about racism, racist police officers, and that race is prevalent in everything this country does. And until we really wholeheartedly start addressing that, I think at least to a certain extent, we will continue to have these issues. And that's why we spend a lot of time in this police department doing implicit bias classes, putting our officers together with communities that they don't have a history with, or they didn't grow up in, to learn from each other. So basically, we bring the community into the police department, and we bring the police department into the community to learn from each other and equip our officers to be able to work in this entire city. We have a very diverse city. What is important to one neighborhood might not be important to another neighborhood. And if I didn't grow up in that neighborhood, then maybe I don't understand all that. So we are actively working on getting our officers, oftentimes before they ever put the uniform on, into those situations where they can have time where they can learn about what each community values, the culture that might be different from the culture they grew up in. So they are fully equipped to be able to provide good police service and service to those communities. So that's how we're trying to help in that situation. But I think as a country, if we don't address that, we're going to continue to see these issues get worse and worse and worse. And the reason why we see it play out more in law enforcement than anywhere else is because the power that we have in law enforcement. We have the power to take your freedom away. We have the power to take life away. And so it really gets focused on law enforcement, but the reality is it's the ill that plagues this entire country.
My colleague Mady Gomez wants to ask what you think about doing away with qualified immunity for police officers, and how might that impact your everyday duties if you were to go down that policy route?
Yeah, I think any significant change like that obviously is going to have ramifications, both good and bad. So I really can't answer that until I really understand what that truly means and what that would entail. And so I couldn't really give an answer to that until I would know all that.
Yeah. You think there's some room to explore the idea and what a policy change might look like, though, it sounds like?
I think we all should be willing to explore anything. I mean, unless we want to continue to see the number of people that are really angry and frustrated throughout our country, actually throughout the world on this last one. Unless we want to continue to see that get worse and worse, we all have to be open to everything. That doesn't mean we agree. That doesn't mean that we'll adopt everything, but at least we have to have an open mind and listen to what that would mean, and then make a decision whether that's what we need in our individual communities or not.
Another colleague, Chris Hooks, wants to know when we should expect body camera footage from protests, specifically incidents in which people are accusing officers of shooting them in the face with rubber bullets.
Yeah, fortunately, we're a department that has body cameras. Not all departments have those. So we're reviewing all those uses of force now. So sometime in the future, we'll probably see some of those. But right now, we're still trying to get through all these protests. And we put all our officers on 12-hour shifts. So it's been really busy around here. So we're reviewing the whole protest activities for about 2 weeks straight here in the next couple of months. So sometime in the future, when we get through that, we might see some of those videos.
Do you expect to make some of that public, though, where there are criticisms of the response to demonstrations?
Sure. And I don't know that some of those cases are us. There was multiple agencies involved in a lot of these protests. So that's one of the things as we review who did what, and was it within our policy or not? And is there any way we could be better at future protests? Because this won't be, we're Sacramento. We're capital of California. There's going to be future protests. And if there are issues where we could get better, we're absolutely going to do that.
Understood. Another colleague, Andy Judson, is working on a story about facial recognition. So this is a little out of left field, but she wants to know if the department uses Clearview AI, or if not them, any other facial recognition technologies. And if
we don't use facial recognition.
Okay. And let's see. I feel like I had one more. Oh, this was a good one. Monica Woods, our meteorologist, actually had one for you. Wants to know about retraining veteran officers with all these discussions about tactics changing and the banning of certain holds. How much effort does it take to take a veteran officer who's been given this toolkit and tell them, you know what, actually stop using that one?
Well, it doesn't matter whether they're a veteran officer or a newer officer. All of our officers, every single one of them, has to go through a week worth of training, similar to what teachers have to do, where they go to in-service training. All of our police officers go through 40 hours of training every single year, and that doesn't count other individual trainings that they might go to, or one-day trainings that we put on for various things. But every single officer in the Sacramento Police Department goes through 40 hours of training every year. So they're all trained on the same things, whether they're a veteran officer or a newer officer.
And on those new hires, that was another thing that her question sparked with me is, have there been meaningful changes either recently or that you're contemplating to sort of backgrounding new hires who have prior police experience for any use of force incidents or complaints? I mean, are those getting a deeper look in
No,
your department than they did
they're
before?
not getting a deeper look because one of the misperceptions that I often hear at community meetings or in the neighborhoods is that officers that get in trouble in one department can then just before they get fired or maybe after they get fired just slide on to another department. That has never been true for the Sacramento Police Department and nor any department that I know. I imagine there might be some small departments here and there that don't do this, but every person that applies to the Sacramento Police Department has to sign a form that they basically withdraw their rights to privacy. So our background investigator goes to whatever department they were with before and looks through their entire internal affairs file and their entire personnel file. So there's nothing that they could have done in that department that we don't know about. If they don't sign that form, their background ends right there. It's a requirement of our background. So every department I know does that very same thing. So there isn't any, so if a department hires somebody that has some horrific background in some previous department, that's on them. They've chose to either not look or chose that that's okay and they're gonna hire them anyway.
I guess last thing before I let you go is I hear you striking a very measured tone with the people demonstrating and trying to express some measure of empathy and sympathy for why they're out there. Do you encourage this to keep going on, even though obviously it makes more work for your officers as long as it stays peaceful? Would you be happy to see them in the streets for however long?
Well, yeah, I think our city is again, it's Sacramento, California. It's the capital of California. I mean, protest is not a stranger to Sacramento. I think throughout our country, throughout history, you've seen protests and things that have sprouted out of protests have made substantial change in our country and made things better for our country. So I think that's one of the reasons why the great things about our country have occurred a lot of times. It's because of protests or people that speak out and speak out against the status quo. So we welcome protests. We welcome peaceful protests. We do not welcome people that want to come and be violent towards officers, be violent towards other community members, and destroy businesses that, you know, a business owner has, you know, potentially put their life savings into a business and then it's destroyed by people that are bent on destruction. So we always welcome protests. It's pretty much a daily occurrence in this city, and it's something that we value a lot in Sacramento.
Yeah, I mean, it did strike me. I was here actually before I moved out here. I was helping to cover some of the Stephon Clark story, and it struck me that basically what you had was a de facto arrangement of saying, you know, as long as you're not literally shutting down intersections, but you keep moving, you know, we want to let you be able to do this. And it sounds like that is what you would like to keep continuing.
Yeah, it's everyone's its own situation, but it's a fine balance between letting people express their First Amendment rights and the safety of our community. So yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate for Sacramento. But each time we have to make that judgment of what is still safe enough to do while we're still allowing people to express the things that they need to express.